Hi class. We are going to be talking about quantum mechanics, so we're sort of shifting in the class. We've dealt with cosmology and big picture physics, right, like general relativity and planets and Big Bang and all of that. We've talked about biology and evolution. We're now going to talk about quantum mechanics. This is not easy, right? It's not easy for me to understand. I'm not a scientist. I suggest that you watch those two videos I posted on Canvas. They're above the lecture, so watch those two YouTube videos. They're just kind of like animated videos to help give the basics, right? I want to help try to begin applying these things to philosophical conclusions and theological conclusions that they might help us draw. So that's sort of what I'm going to do. I can't teach you quantum mechanics, but I can talk about some of the implications of quantum. I'm at my church here. Quite frankly, I'm scared of quantum mechanics. I don't know what to make of wave-particle duality, and so it feels like voodoo magic. So what better place to talk about quantum mechanics than the safety of my church? In all seriousness, I hope you're all doing well. If you're running into trouble trying to do distance learning and other things, please let me know. I'm a pretty understanding person. I want to help you succeed in the class. First paragraphs were submitted. I'll be giving you feedback very soon. I want you to be able to talk to me about questions you have, problems you're facing, and we'll work this out together. I'm certainly going to have grace. If you end up with less outside sources than I require, it's going to be okay. You don't have access to the library. You only have access to online resources, right? So work hard to find good outside research online, but talk to me, keep me informed, and I'll have grace, and we'll work this out together. So a couple of things I want to point out. One of them is Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, right? So you've heard about this. Essentially, it means that at the smallest levels, we cannot, with any degree of certainty, know the location and the momentum of a particle. The more we know the location, the less we know the momentum. The more we know the momentum, the less we know the location. And here's the key, though. These probability waves that quantum mathematicians use to calculate where an electron is or how it's moving or a proton or a quark, they are fundamentally indeterminate. Okay? Fundamentally indeterminate, meaning there is no way to know with exact certainty both the location and the momentum. We can't. We can only know with probability. This is not a limit of our knowledge. This is not a limit in epistemology, right? This is not a limit in our technology or in the instruments we're using. This is a fundamental limit. We can't, it is unknowable, right? One might even say God can't know with certainty both of those things because it can't be known, right? It's a fundamental indeterminacy at the lowest levels, right? Now, some of you might balk at that. Look, God can know everything. I'm fine if God knows with certainty the momentum and location of an electron. That's not the argument. But it seems to be a fundamental limit of the physical world, the physical universe, not a problem with human knowledge, right? This is the way the world operates. And I find this to be fascinating, right? Because remember, macro events, like what I'm doing right now, throwing a baseball, the Earth going around the sun, macro events. We've got Newton's laws and Einstein's laws that can with exact precision tell me if I throw a baseball at a particular angle, at a particular force, with this much friction, with exact certainty where the ball will end, right? Large-scale laws of physics are deterministic, and we can get exact answers to questions. How much weight can this bridge hold? But at the quantum level, we can't have that kind of certainty. There's a fundamental indeterminacy, and yet macro events, like throwing a baseball, are made up of micro events, quantum events, right? It's all the same universe. Much of what's happening in my brain are quantum events, tiny events, electrical level, chemical level, hormonal level, micro events that are fundamentally indeterminate, can't be known with certainty. So this says something about the natural world we live in. It says something about the way God created the universe. I think it adds a whole lot of randomness in the world, a lot of random quantum events. It seems to me that nature is dynamic at its lowest levels, even a table, ton of quick moving electrical particles, right? It's dynamic, it's active, it's probabilistic, it's random. There seems to be an autonomy given. If you want to advocate for human free will, it's really hard in Newton's world, where the laws of nature are deterministic. But it's a lot easier to argue that humans have free will if much of my decision making is neurological and those quantum events are not deterministic, right? But probabilistic. It doesn't prove freedom, it opens the door to freedom, right? Something that's important, free will, from a philosophical perspective, is not randomness, right? Something can be random and not free. I roll a dice, there's randomness there, right? But not freedom. Some of you are playing video games, like I play sports games, Madden, or NBA Live. I remember, I was playing baseball the other day, and I'm playing against the artificial intelligence, right, the computer, and the computer's selecting a pitch and a location, and is it going to be a fastball, whatever. There's some arbitrariness, there's some programming, there's some randomness involved, but none of us would say that's free, right? So I think something can be random, something can be arbitrary, and that doesn't mean freedom. So the quantum randomness, the quantum probabilities that we see don't prove human free will, but the fact that they exist allows for freedom to emerge at higher levels, that emergence, right, with consciousness. It makes it possible. If all we had were deterministic laws in a fully physical universe, it would be very difficult to advocate for human free will. So I think quantum opens the door. That's a philosophical import here, where science and philosophy meet. Okay, I've mentioned that a moral universe, it would have to be somewhat predictable, so I know what my actions will do in the world. I have to predict consequences if I'm going to be a moral agent. If I have no idea what my action's going to do in the world, then we can't be moral, right? If I don't know if when I shoot my gun at someone what that will do, then right, like I shoot them and they might die. I shoot them and a heart might come out the end of the gun and like kiss them on the mouth or something, right? Like if I have no idea what's going to happen, if it's totally random, then that kind of universe doesn't allow for morality. We have to have something like a law-like universe. However, morality also requires freedom. If I'm not free, then I can't be morally praised or morally blamed for anything that I do. So a universe that's moral, a universe I would argue that's spiritual, a universe that requires growth, transformation, movement from potential to actual, has to be both law-like and free. And at larger levels, like throwing baseballs, it's law-like. But at lower levels, it feels like maybe there's room for free will. So Heisenberg's uncertainty principle can be beneficial, but it also says, man, the natural world's weird. The nature of the universe is crazy, much weirder than we once thought, right? That these quantum events are happening, that they're not known or deterministic, but probabilistic, that we can have things like quantum tunneling, that electrons can go through a wall, right, through a barrier, that small particles are able to do that from time to time is a bizarre thing, right? How can that be? And you start to think, maybe more things are possible than we think. Maybe God has created a natural world that allows for the unexpected, the rare, the miraculous even, because the quantum level is so strange, so odd. Hypothetically, I could walk through a wall if all of my particles tunneled at the same time. Now that would be highly improbable. 1 to, I don't know what the power would be, unlikely, right? But possible. The physical universe allows for me to walk through walls, but it's just very improbable. Add God to the mix, and the physical world allows for the improbable, maybe at God's disposal, at God's will. And so I think the universe we live in is alive, filled with spirit, dynamic. You watched one about wave-particle duality. I mean, talk about a mind blow. Like, I just get freaked out every time I think about it. That if you open one slit and you shoot atoms or electrons through it one at a time, the interference pattern is that they are particles going through that one slit. You open a second slit and you fire particles one at a time, and suddenly you get a wave formation. You get like an interference pattern that looks like a wave. All that's different is we just opened a second slit and now they're interfering with each other. But how could they interfere? We're shooting electrons one at a time. But they do. Even weirder. You open two slits, you should get a wave pattern, shooting electrons one at a time. You put a device that's going to monitor the electrons, and suddenly it's like the electrons are like, hey, act like particles, act like particles. Even if two slits are open, now we have a device watching, boom, they go through, they look like particles. Just a second ago, we shot electrons one at a time through two slits and we got a wave. Now we're shooting particles one at a time through two slits and they look like particles because we have a device monitoring. Put the same device but unplug it, they look like waves again. As though the electrons know whether the camera, whether the detection device is plugged in or not. Are you kidding? Like, do electrons have minds? How do they know whether they're being perceived or not? Why would that even matter for the behavior of quantum particles at all? The world we live in is dynamic, miraculous, beautiful, strange, right? It means that what we once thought was impossible in the natural world, I think might be possible. I think the natural world is capable of doing things, solving problems, allowing for events that are incredibly unique, rare, and novel. And God created it that way, right? God created, I would argue, nature autonomous, free, and dynamic, with elements of probability and randomness and unpredictability. And this is why nature, matter, energy, has created the vast number of galaxies and planets and stars and life on Earth, and it is majestic. It takes my breath away, right? But I think it has something to say about morality and free will and whatnot. We're going to be moving into a few readings that think maybe when we think about the quantum activity, it might say something about God's activity in the world. So we often think about God's activity as miraculous, breaking in, dropping the walls of Jericho, parting the Red Sea, like violating the laws of nature, right? We think about God's action like as a miraculous thing. But what if these unpredictable quantum events, we're not sure if proton A is going to end up in this location or that location with this speed or that speed. We're not quite sure. We'll have to wait and see where it ends up, right? We have a probabilistic wave function for it. But what if God begins to nudge that proton into a particular direction, causing quantum events to occur, right? Those quantum events inevitably lead to events in the macro world, right? Enough quantum events and you get a macro event. God could conceivably be active at the quantum level, getting macro level results without violating any laws of nature. No laws of nature violated, divine activity working with creation as created by God to produce certain effects in the world. So this is something we're going to be talking about in relationship to quantum activity in the quantum world. Part of this is just to be in awe of what we have discovered, in awe of how God has created, and to see all the ways in which this might connect to theology, philosophy, and whatnot. And to recap, it has implications regarding the way God created, randomness and probability all throughout the world. I think mutations are like this. These are micro events that often are random. It has to do with human free will and the possibility that we might be free and morally responsible. I think it's going to have to say, it might have something to say about how God might work in the world with nature, not violating nature, but with the quantum. And so we'll be talking more about this in the days to come. I hope this is helpful. If you have any questions, let me know.